Everywhere I go, the children rising. Everywhere I go, the children rising. I saw them just rise up, the wicked running. I saw them just rise up, the wicked running. Equal rights and justice, when I defend, we won't run away. Run away, run away, run away, run away. We won't run away. Run away, run away, run away, run away. If you go in America, children arise. If you go in Canada, children arise. If you go in Africa, children arise. I saw them just rise up, the wicked run. I saw them just rise up, the wicked run. I saw them just rise up, the wicked run. We won't run away. Run away, run away, run away, run away. We won't run away. Run away, run away, run away, run away.
I'm going to say shalom and blessings to all of my brothers and sisters, all of my kinsmen, according to the flesh, who are Israelites, to whom pertain the adoption and the glory and the covenants and the giving of the law and the service of Elohim and the promises, whose are the fathers, and of whom, as concerning the flesh, our Mashiach came, who is over all, Elohim blessed forever and ever. Amen. I want to give our praises to our Heavenly Father, sustainer of all things. I want to give our praises to his one and only begotten Son, Yehoshua HaMashiach, our Redeemer and our Savior. And I want to give our praises to the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of truth, the Comforter, the divine essence of our Elohim. Our praises to the one and only true Elohim. I want to say shalom and blessings to everybody in the chat. Hope y'all had a blessed day today. And I want to thank everybody for chiming in for this session of, it's basically a reading session. We're going to be examining through the text. I don't want to call it an ancient text, but it's an old record entitled The Religious Instruction for the Negro. And what this document is going to basically show us is the history of our people upon entering into this nation, being assimilated into this nation, and ultimately being converted over into the main religion that we know of as Christianity, and the purposes that this religion was supposed to serve for our people upon being in this land. But before we get started, I want to give a shout out to my brothers over at the Salt of the Earth, all my family over there. Hope all my brothers are doing well. Hope you had a blessed day. I want to say shalom to Brother Darnell Blackshear. Hope all is well. Hope you had a blessed day. Maria, shalom to you. You got optimal training. Good to see you in the chat. Hope all is well. Jason Philip McCauley, shalom to you. Hope all is well. Sister Deja Vu, shalom to you. Hope you had a blessed day. Hope all is well. Got my brother Keith McNeely, shalom to you, my bro. Hope you had a blessed day. Hope all is well. Got Sister Rochelle, Yah's daughter, shalom. Hope you're doing well, sis. Hope all is well. Got Roosevelt Conklin, shalom to you. Glad to see you in the chat. Hope you had a blessed day. Katrina Brown, shalom to you. Hope all is well with you. Got my love in the chat. Shibriya, shalom to you. Got, who else? Sister Devora Cotton, shalom to you. Hope all is well. Good to see you in the chat. It look like that's about everybody. Let me see. Got Mr. Thorpe 6'9" in the chat. Shalom to you. Hope all is well. Did I let's see. Got Sister Katrina Brown in the chat. Shalom to you. Hope all is well. Image of Shiloh. Shalom, shalom. It look like that's about it in the chat. Yeah, that's about everybody. Yeah, I hope everybody had a blessed day. Good time to sit down and unwind at the end of the day with some good information. So once again, good to see everybody. Before we get started, I want to keep everybody in remembrance of the presentation, the first part of the presentation of supersessionism. It's live in 10 days. All right. It's a big presentation. This information is going to hopefully help brothers and sisters clear the air on understanding the religion as a whole, what it has done to our people, the different doctrines, the different beliefs that our people have been forced to go along with as a means of this. So it's going to really bring a lot of light. We want to remind everybody 5 and 10 days. Also, for brothers and sisters who know other people who are dealing with this issue or want to know more about it or maybe interested in it, feel free to share it with those people. Shalom, Brother Rio Morgan. Hope you're doing well, bro. Got my brother Big Red. Shalom, Brother Big Red. Hope all is well. Sister Aniana Coleman, shalom to you. Hope all is well. Hope everybody had a blessed day. So, since we on the topic of supersessionism, a lot of what we're going to be doing, well, a lot of what I'm going to try to do anyway from now up until the time the work start dropping is dealing with issues that sort of fall in line with this topic of supersessionism, So we'll be dealing with things like this tonight, like tonight, we're going to be reading from the religious instruction for the Negro. All right. And so a lot of this plays a part in understanding supersessionism, because all supersessionism is a replacement. All right. In order for somebody to replace you from a position that you're in, they're going to have to get rid of you some kind of way, physically altogether, or do something crafty in a way to elevate themselves, to put themselves in your spot. And this is kind of a mixture of what happened to our people due to slavery, and then due to all the systematic things that our people have been through from chattel slavery up to this point. All right, so just a reminder on that. A lot of what I'll be doing personally will be leading up to the work dealing with the supersessionism. And then also you have other brothers as well. You got Brother Cleo. We dealing with, I believe he has something coming up tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe during his Kingdom Conversations this Wednesday night. But a lot of history showing what our people been through in the past as a means to get us to the point that we are today. Brother Bunya and I were talking earlier, and one of the things we were talking about was how the suffering that our forefathers went through in this nation goes either unestimated, unrecognized, or disrespected altogether by our people. One of the statements you hear people say is, we not our forefathers, or we not our ancestors, And that would imply that our ancestors had weaknesses that we don't have. But, I beg to differ. To me, it's the other way around. We're more weaker in our generation now than they were. However, they would want us to think that it's the other way around. Not many of us today can endure what a lot of them endured. And also, when it came to our people, standing up and fighting, how many of our people are willing to do that today? How many of our people are willing to stand up and fight, even to the point of not loving their own lives, just so another generation can progress? The Most High gave our forefathers during that time the spirit to endure, just like during the days of the apostles. He endowed on them the spirit to endure the hardships that they had to go through. In our time, we don't really have to deal with, as much as they had to deal with. We have racism and different things like that. But things today are, in my view, on a lighter note than they were back then, especially for those who really have faith in the Most High. He said he would give you peace among your enemies. And so that's another concept that our people would have to grasp also, another concept rather, that our people would have to grasp. But long story short, live in 10 days, February 25th, 4 p.m. That'll be on a Friday of this month, February 25th, part 1 of supersessionism. And this has been something that everybody's been waiting for a long time. I know I'm kind of anxious for it. And so I'm glad to know that, this work is ready to drop. I want to thank the Most High for giving us the endurance. I want to thank you, brothers and sisters, for being patient. And also for the brother Bunya, for all of the work that he's put in on the technical side, as far as laying everything out, putting everything in sequence and everything. I want to thank the Most High for that, brother, and keep him in your prayers as well. So also, I forgot to mention that with the reading tonight, the religious instruction for the Negro, I'm going to be sharing it on my screen. I want to thank the brother Yashadik for actually giving me the source of this information. And so for anybody who would like to read along, and have this information, just request it via email, ebrestore@gmail.com. For those of you brothers and sisters who want a copy of the religious instruction of the Negro, just email me, and then let me know who you are and that you're requesting a copy of the religious instruction of the Negro, and then I'll get you taken care of from there. All right. And so on that note, brothers and sisters, we can go ahead and get into it. But you know how we do. I'm going to take a break first, for everybody who needs to get your snacks and your drinks or whatever, get those things ready. Shalom, Sister Linda Ricks. See you in the chat. Shalom to you. Sister Diane Gardner Young, shalom to you. See you in the chat. It said, is that 4 p.m.? I'm going to really have to double check on that and see if he's 4 p.m. Central or Pacific time. So I'll be sure and clarify that. But thank you for asking that. we'll clarify that with the brother. Shalom, Sister Sariyah Shebrew. Good to see you in the chat. Hope you had a blessed day today. So let's do this, brothers and sisters. When I come back, we're going to take a break. When I come back, I'm going to get into this book. This is a book that I haven't really read through myself. Shalom, Troy the Brew. Shalom to you. Hope you're doing well. Hope you had a blessed day. Glad to have you in the chat. But as I was saying, this is a book that I haven't really read through myself. So this will be a work that we'll be kind of digging through together. So I'll be highlighting and, gesturing and doing what I do, as if I'm reading alone as we go through this. And like I said, you brothers and sisters can join in on the screen. However, if you want a copy of it, request that via email at ebrestore@gmail.com. Shalom, Hadasab Minyah. Hope you're doing well. Hope you had a blessed day. Good to see you in the chat. So yeah, let's break off, brothers and sisters. And when I come back, we're going to get into it. I want to say shalom to everybody once again. I want to thank everybody for your time coming in and winding down with the family. All right. I'll be right back. Shalom.
I get rolling to the people, yeah. The fire burn them wicked people, then the fire burn them wicked men. The fire burn them wicked friend. Fire burn on you wicked, burn on all of them. The fire burn them wicked countrymen. The fire burn the wicked town. The fire burn them wicked city. Fire burn on you wicked, burn them. When it's impossible to see what's become of our people in their life, they're doing so much evil. We will wobble, a triple ton and trouble them. Sell them soldiers to work for the devil. But judges say, judgment may soon come when the walls of our son once again can complete and beautiful Nash. People them are more with judge you for all this rocks with fire and brimstone. The fire burn them wicked people then. The fire burn the wicked men. The fire burn them wicked friend. Fire burn on the wicked, burn on all of them. We say the fire burn the wicked country. The fire burn the wicked town. The fire burn the wicked city. Fire burn on the wicked, burn on Babylon. You know the people them must suffer and the world and eat and bleed while you spread your lies and propaganda. Sow your bloody seed. The children working, the fingers to the bone while you pay all the money to some pretty face without a clothes. And your time will come, it will come just saying when you beg the hills for cover, but the hills will run away. When we listen, when we learn, it meant too late to have forgiveness when you will begin to burn. The fire burn them wicked people then. The fire burn the wicked men. The fire burn them wicked friend. Fire burn on the wicked, burn on all of them. And the arrow pressing, we shall overcome, but certain nations ought instead. I give a little and even shed it, yes. Easy said it now, but that's as for some butter or the bread. The fathers giving their lives up the son, doing battle for the devil, warring for the wicked one. You might think this is just another song, but the blood you speak, you calling out a long way. Yeah. The fire burn them wicked people. Then the fire burn the wicked men. The fire burn them wicked friend. Fire burn down the wicked, burn down all of them. They say fire burn them wicked people. Then the fire burn the wicked men. Fire burning, wicked friend, fire burn on me.
I want to say shalom to my brother Smitty. I see you in the chat, Smitty. Smitty say he's still on the JO right now on the lift. Shalom, my bro. Hope you're doing good. Hope you're being safe. You know, them forklifts ain't no joke. I know what they do. I'm glad to see you, bro. Shalom also to Marcella Smith. I see you in the chat. Hope you had a blessed day today. Glad to see you. Brothers and sisters, Wednesday nights, 8 p.m., Kingdom Conversations. That's 8 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, hosted by our beloved brother Cleo, big brother Cleo. All right. Don't forget about Wake Up Jacob, Fridays, 12 noon Central. That would be 10 a.m. Pacific and 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern, depending on where you are. And also the prayers, Friday night prayer and fellowship, 8:30 p.m. Central, 6:30 p.m. Pacific, and that'll be 9 to 10:30 p.m. Eastern, depending on where you are. Just a reminder on that. So let's get into it. I actually, in the live that Brother Kadar and I did last week, I kind of went through the contents of this. And I mentioned how I hadn't really read through it yet. So like I said, this is something we'll be going through, just kind of skimming. I actually skimmed through it, and so we're going to come across some things, but I haven't really just read through it. But this is part one. This is the historical sketch of the religious instruction of the Negroes from their first introduction into the country in 1620 to the year 1842. All right, so according to this source, we have a sort of a connection with where we stand in terms of the 400-year prophecy, 1619 to 1620. There go Brother T. What's going on? Got Brother T. What's going on, bro? Hope you're doing well. Glad to see you. So 1620, all right, lines up with where we stand. So this is chapter 1, the first period from their introduction in 1620 to the first census in 1719, a period of 170 years. So the first census was taken in 1790. It was 170 years before the first census was taken. All right, and you can look that up as well to verify that. What year was the first census taken? Such is the scarcity of materials and the difficulty of arriving at the scattered sources of information that I have called the following historical note of the religious instruction of the Negroes in the United States, a sketch. All right, so this is pretty much an approximation almost based on older sources that they were able to collect. It deserves no better name, although perhaps it may embody the principal facts on the subject. All right, so like I said, this is just a document that sort of gives an approximation in terms of the numbers or the populations of what took place, but it embodies the principal facts. All right, so we're going to get the basics of what went on with our people. For the sake of perspicuity, the sketch is divided into periods of time. The first period extending from the introduction of the Negroes into the country in 1620 to the first census in 1719, a period of 170 years. The second period from 1790 to 1820, a period of 30 years. And the third period, 1820 to 1842, a period of 22 years. Account of the introduction of Negroes into the colonies under government of Great Britain. That's important to note, that when the Negroes were introduced into the colonies of America, it was under Great Britain. All right. It was in the year 1501 that Isabella of Spain granted permission for the introduction of Negro slaves into Hispaniola. All right. But such only as had been born in Spain were in slavery among the Christians, and in the following year, a few had been sent to the New World. All right, so a lot of people will say 1501 was the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade. So that would sort of throw things off in terms of our position. But we see that in 1501, it was the Spanish or Spain who granted permission for the introduction of Negroes into Hispaniola. All right. But such as only has been born in Spain. So these were the only Negroes who were allowed into this region of Hispaniola. All right. The Negroes that were born in Spain. So in 1508, the Spaniards opened a direct trade in slaves and imported Negroes into Hispaniola from the Portuguese settlements on the coast of Guinea. Guinea is on the coast of West Africa. And we're aware of the history that the Portuguese established those coasts with slaves. It says Ferdinand by royal ordinance enjoined a direct traffic in slaves between Guinea and Hispaniola in 1511, and Charles V in 1512 to 1513. If I didn't get that right, y'all help me out. I'm not good with Roman numerals. In 1517, Charles V granted a patent to one of his Flemish favorites containing an exclusive right to importing slaves for thousands annually into Hispaniola, Cuba, Jamaica, and Puerto Rico. This favorite sold his patent to some Guineas merchants for 25 ducats, and they were the first who brought into regular form that commerce for slaves between Africa and America. All right. Which has since been carried under such revolting circumstances and to such an amazing extent. 45 years after, in 1562 to 1563, the English entered the trade under Sir John Hawkins and carried Negroes from Africa to Hispaniola. All right. So at this point, no Negroes had been brought to America yet, the shores of America, although they were brought to different parts of the Americas. All right. Hold on one second. All right, so if we give me 1 second. Okay, give me 1 second. I'm gonna stop sharing this. I'm gonna share something real quick. Just to get a better idea. The island that we know today as Haiti and the Dominican Republic was known as Hispaniola. So when they were transporting slaves from Guinea to Africa, this is where they were bringing them, as well as to other parts, Cuba, Puerto Rico, all those islands. That's why we always say the only difference between the Negroes here in America and the Negroes in these lands is that they got dropped off first. So this is Hispaniola, all right? So let's go back. So 45 years after, in 1562 to 63, the English entered the trade under Sir John Hawkins and carried Negroes from Africa to Hispaniola. And in 1567, Queen Elizabeth protected and shared the traffic. So Negroes was carried to these places. Let's see. Thus, it says that in 1567, Queen Elizabeth protected and shared the traffic. So the Queen of England got involved, and it says, thus, the mother country was engaged in the traffic 45 years before the first permanent settlement was made in her American colonies, which was at Jamestown, Virginia in 1607. So the British, England, and all those was already in the slave trade, but they were transporting slaves from Africa to Hispaniola. But the first American colonies by Queen Elizabeth were established in Jamestown, Virginia in 1607. Now, this is not telling you that this is when they were bringing slaves over. This is when they were establishing the colonies so that they could bring them over. So in 1607 is when they brought them over. All right, the Dutch, in common with other maritime nations of Europe, engaged in the trade, and a man of war of that notion from the coast of Guinea in August of 1620. 4 months before the Plymouth colony arrived in America, landed 20 Negroes for sale in the colony of Virginia on James River, which determines the epoch of their introduction into the colonies, or the beginning. All right. This was in 1620, according to this record. So the Dutch, in common with other maritime nations of Europe, engaged in the trade. All right. And after that, well before that, they colonized. Parts of Europe had Africa colonized. It says from this period, they were gradually and at different times introduced into all the colonies from Massachusetts to Georgia, and for the most part, contrary to the wishes of the colonists. So in other words, when they were first bringing the slaves over, they started to bring them over to Virginia in 1620, and from there, they started to take them up into the other parts of the coast of the 13 colonies, Massachusetts, Georgia, South Carolina, and all those different places. But it says, contrary to the wishes of the colonists. So not everybody wanted Negroes brought to their colonies or to their states. The first cargo of Negro slaves was brought into Boston in 1645. And though their introduction was denounced and the Negroes ordered to be returned at public charge, yet it was afterwards permitted and people engaged in the trade. All right, so 1645, according to this record, is when they were brought to Boston. All right, in Maryland, acts were passed encouraging the importation of Negroes in 1671. And in this same year, they were first introduced into South Carolina. So, yeah, South Carolina and Maryland in 1671. So a lot of people will say that, 1619 may not be accurate, 1620 may not be accurate. But we see that it was later on that the Negroes was brought to other parts or other states. But 1619 to 1620 is established for sure in terms of them first being brought here to Virginia. It says they were legally admitted into Georgia in 1747. The precise year of their admission into the remaining 8 of the old 13 colonies is not accurately known. All right, so you had the other states within the 13 colonies. According to this record, it said it's not accurately known when these Negroes arrived in those colonies. All right. Now remember, it was 170 years from 1620 that the first census was taken. So they didn't even know how many Negroes they had. They was just really counting money. However much money they could get or was benefiting, that's all that mattered to them. And I'm sure they kept a head count, but nothing spectacular. You see, they didn't really have an orderly system of documentation. Kind of like today, ain't nothing in order today. You gotta yell at people to get them to do what you want, and half of the people incompetent in what they do. It says estimated Negro population of the colonies at the Declaration of Independence and census of 1790. I have no references at hand by which to determine the number of Negroes in each of the colonies, nor the aggregate in all before the Declaration of Independence, as no general census was ever taken of the colonies while they continue such. But there are statements of the number in most of the colonies given in different years, which I shall proceed to mention. All right, so Virginia was settled in 1607. All right, it was settled in 1607, but it wasn't until 1620 that they brought them over. And in 1671 contained 2,000 Negroes. In 1763, 100,000. All right, so how accurate this is, I don't know. All right. But this is based on the records that they kept or that he was able to, compile during different years. You see, like in 1671, but they came in 1620, then 1763, 100,000. So that's a lot. Like I said, I don't know how accurate that is. In Massachusetts was settled in 1620. And in 1763 contained 4,500 Negroes. Rhode Island was settled in 1636, and in 1680 had imported but a few Negroes, In 1730, contained 1,648, and in 1748, 4,373. All right, that's Rhode Island. So remember, the slaves came to the east coast of this nation first. All right, Connecticut was settled in 1635, and in 1680 had 30 Negroes. So from 1635 to 1680, 30 Negroes, and in 1774, 6,464. Also take into account when it said that some of these colonies weren't accepting or allowing Negroes in, or they weren't happy about Negroes being brought. But then later on, they started to accept it. All right, so New Hampshire was settled from Massachusetts and became a separate colony in 1741. And in 1775 contained 659 Negroes. So that must have been one of them places where they didn't want Negroes. New Hampshire, I don't even think a lot of Negroes live there now. That don't even sound like a place where a lot of Negroes are. New Hampshire. New York was settled by the Dutch in 1613, and in 1756 contained 13,542 Negroes. That's New York. New Jersey. That's where I think Brother Hal from New York, Brother Yash from Jersey. Jersey was settled in 1627. In 1738 contained 3,981 Negroes and slaves. And in 1745, they had 4,606. That's Jersey. So if you're in Jersey, this is where you come from. All right. Maryland. Of course, they migrated further into the interiors, the South, and so forth and so on. Maryland was granted to Lord Baltimore in 1632. In 1755, contained 42,764 Negroes. And for a time, 2,000 were imported annually. Mr. Burke says 1757, the number was upwards of 60,000. So some of these states had a lot of slavery, going on. Some of them wasn't really with it at first, but then they gradually got into it. But 2,000 annually, all right? And we know once they got over here, how they multiplied and grew. North Carolina was permanently settled in 1650 and became distinct from Virginia in 1727. In 1701, it had 5,000 inhabitants besides Negroes and Indians. And in 1702, 6,000. All right. So I'm not sure what this is indicating. 5,000 inhabitants besides Negroes and Indians. And in 1706, 6,000. All right. South Carolina was granted to Lord Clarendon in 1662. In 1723, it contained 18,000 Negroes. In 1724, 439 were imported. In 1730, it contained 28,000. That's 10,000 increase from 1723 to 1730. In 1731, 1,500 were imported. In 1765, contained 90,000. This is South Carolina. In 1773, over 6,000 were imported. This colony lost 25,000 Negroes in the Revolutionary War. So South Carolina had a large population of Negroes. Georgia was settled in 1732 or 1733. Slavery was legalized in 1747, and in 1772 contained 14,000 Negroes. This is Georgia. The probable number of Negroes in the colonies at the Declaration of Independence in 1776 may be ascertained in the following manner. Take the known population in the different colonies nearest the year 1776. Compare that with the census of 1790. Take into consideration the rate of increase from nature and from importation, and also the decrease, and then give the supposed population in round numbers. So all that is basically telling you in so many words, they don't know how many Negroes there were from the time of the Declaration of Independence until the time they took the first census. They had to estimate it. Massachusetts last returned in 1776, 1773 to 1776. 13 years, the population decreasing. Supposed population in 1776, 3,500. That's Massachusetts. Population decrease. Rhode Island, 1748 to 1776, 28 years. Stationary, 4,373. All right, so it kind of remains stable. Connecticut, 1774 to 1776, 2 years, a decrease of 6,000. This is how many Negroes, I believe it's saying, that were, I think it said lost in the war. All right. During the Declaration of Independence, I'm sorry. Taking on the population of different colonies. Yep. So this is the decrease of the Negroes. Connecticut, we're in New Hampshire. 1775 to 1776, 1 year, stationary, 649. New York, 1756 to 1776, 20 years, increasing to 15,000, 20 years. New York, New Jersey, 1745 to 1776, 31 years, increasing 7,600. Delaware, estimated in 1776, compared with 1790. 9,000. Pennsylvania, estimated in 1775, compared with 1790. The Act of Abolition in 1780, taken into the account, 10,000. Pennsylvania. In 1757, Mr. Burke says, not the 40th part of the inhabitants were Negroes. So that was Pennsylvania. Maryland, 1755 to 1776, 21 years, increasing 80,000. Virginia, 1776 to 1773, 63 to 1776, 13 years, increasing. Virginia, 165,000. It's like you go to some of these places today, you'll see a lot of Negroes in a lot of these places now. North Carolina estimated in the same way as Delaware. 9,000. North Carolina estimated the same way as Delaware. 75,000. South Carolina, 1765 to 1776, 11 years, increasing, and loss in revolution considered, 110,000. Georgia, 1772 to 1776, 4 years, increasing to 16,000, a total of 502,132. This is how they estimated how many Negroes was there during the first census, making a total in round numbers of 500,000 Negroes who had, in the course of 156 years, from 1620 to 1776, accumulated on our shores by importation and natural increase. The proportion of free Negroes in this estimate at the Declaration of Independence must have been inconsiderable, as it was not until after the Revolution that manumissions by owners and manumissions in the progress of acts of abolition multiplied. The census of the United States for 1790 gives 697,697 slaves and 59,481 free persons of color, a total of 757,178. All right. So this was the amount of Negroes they estimated in 1790. 59 of these, 59,481 of these were free persons of color. All right. In 1790. Efforts for their religious instruction, both in Great Britain and America, year by year during this period, having brought distinctly to view this multitude of people introduced among us in the inscrutable providence of God, the original stock being in a state of absolute heathenism. This is what they were saying about our people, that we were in a state of absolute heathenism. We may inquire into the efforts made for their religious instruction. 1673, Mr. Baxter published his Christian Directory, in which he has a chapter of directions to those masters in foreign plantations who have Negroes and other slaves, being a solution of several cases about them. Excuse me. The first direction calls upon the masters to understand well how far your power over your slaves extended and what limits God have set thereto. Remember that they have immortal souls and are equally compatible of salvation with yourselves, and therefore you have no power to do anything which shall hinder their salvation. All right, so this is their view or what they established in terms of the directory of how they wanted to order their slaves. It says, remember that God is there. Remember that God is their absolute owner, and that you have none but a derived and limited propriety in them. that they and you are equally under the government and laws of God, that God is their reconciled, tender Father. And if they be as good, doth love them as well as you, and that they are the redeemed ones of Christ. Therefore, so use them as to preserve Christ's right and interest in them. All right, so this is let me go back. It says that they and you are equally under the government and laws of God. All right. That God is their reconciled, tender Father. And if they be as good, doth love them as well as you. All right. Now, you see, and that they are the redeemed ones of Christ. Therefore, so use them as to preserve Christ's right and interest in them. All right. So I want to share something real quick. Hold on a second. Where is that at? One second. That's what it is. I should have had this ready. I'll find it another time. I wanted to pull up this this statement by one of the early church fathers in this nation, where he talked about how if the Negroes were good Negroes, then they could enter into the kingdom of God as slaves to them. And I think it was under Joseph Smith. He it was some black lady who had dedicated her life to Joseph Smith, and that it said that she would be his loyal slave in the kingdom of heaven. So I wanted to pull that up, but I couldn't find it. Let me see. But it's letting us know who we are. It says that that God is their reconciled, tender Father, and if they be good, doth love them as well as you, and that they are the redeemed ones of Christ. All right. So it's often said that during the slave trade, they knew who they were getting in the slave trade. Hold on a second. Yeah, it's often said that during the slave trade that they knew who they were actually taking in the slave trade. They knew that they were taking the children of Israel. All right, so I just wanted to tie that with that. It says, therefore, so use them as to preserve Christ's right and interest in them. Second direction, remember that you are Christ's trustees or the guardians of their souls, and that the greater your power is over them, the greater your charge is of them and your duty for them. So must you exercise both your power and love to bring them to the knowledge and the faith of Christ and to the just obedience of God's commands. All right. So now all these things on surface sound good, all right? Some people might read some of these things and think it sound good, all right? Let's keep reading. It says, these are directions that they trying to set for the slaves. It says, so serve your necessities by your slaves as to prefer God's interests and their spiritual and everlasting happiness. Teach them the way to heaven and do all for their souls, which I have before directed you to do for all your other servants. Though you make some difference in their labor and diet and clothing, yet none as to the furthering of their salvation. If they be infidels, use them so as intended to win them to Christ and the love of religion by showing them that Christians are less worldly, less cruel and passionate, and more wise and charitable and holy and meek than any other persons are. Wonder if these were the directives. I wonder what happened. Because what none of this done, it says, woe to them that by their cruelty and covetousness do scandalize even slaves and hinder their conversion and salvation. All right, so we often hear people say, and sometimes we hear our own people say, had it not been for slavery, we wouldn't have received the gospel, or we wouldn't have received Christ. Now, in essence, slavery had to happen in order for the gospel to be fulfilled. But we know that the gospel, according to what they told us, is not the true gospel. It said in the seventh and last direction, make it your chief end in buying and using slaves to win them to Christ and save their souls. You're right. Do not only endeavor it on the buy when you have first consulted your own commodity, but make this more of your end than your commodity itself. Let their salvation be far more valued by you than their service. You're right. And carry yourselves to them as those that are sensible, that they are redeemed with them by Christ from the slavery of Satan, and may live with them in the liberty of the saints in glory. The works of this eminent service of God had an extensive circulation, and these directions may have been productive of much good on the plantations of those owners into whose hands they fell. 1680, 44 years after the settlement of Connecticut, the Assembly forwarded answers to the inquiries of the Lords of the Committee of Colonies, wherein they say there are but few servants and fewer slaves, not above 30 in a colony. There come sometimes 3 or 4 blacks from the Barbados, which are sold for 22 ells each. Great care is taken of the instruction of the people in the Christian religion by ministers, catechizing and preaching twice every Sabbath and sometimes on lecture days, and also by masters of families instructing their children and servants, which the law commands them to do. 1701, the Society for the Propaganda of the Gospel in Foreign Parts was incorporated under William III on the 16th day of June 1701. And the first meeting of the society under its charter was the 27th of June of the same year. Thomas Lord Bishop of Canterbury, primate and metropolitan of all England, was appointed by His Majesty the first president. This society was formed with the view primarily of supplying the destitution of religious institutions and privileges among the inhabitants of the North American colonies, members of the established Church of England, and secondarily, the extent of extending the gospel to the Indians and Negroes. All right, so they formed a committee basically where it says their purpose was to try to spread the gospel primarily of supplying the destitution of religious institutions and privileges among the inhabitants of the North American colonies, members of the established Church of England, and secondarily of extending the gospel to the Indians and Negroes. All right, so once again, they wanted to try to convert the native people and the Negroes into Christianity. He said it had been preceded by a company incorporated by Charles II in 1661 for the propagation of the gospel amongst heathen nations of New England and the parts adjacent to America. All right, heathen nations. So just like the Most High considers everybody outside of Israel to be heathen, you know, they considered us heathen. All right. And so they wanted to convert us to their gospel. It says, which, however, did not accomplish much. The design for the times then present and the necessities of the colonies being too narrow. The Honorable Robert Boyle was first president of this company, and it was his connection with this society which led him to a deeper interest in the defense and propagation of the Christian religion, and he therefore left in his will an annual salary forever for the support of 8 sermons in the year for proving the Christian religion against notorious infidels. He requires that the preachers employed shall be assisting to all companies and encouraging them in any undertaking of propagating the Christian religion in foreign parts. All right, so basically they started putting money behind it, you know, putting money behind certain types of sermons and messages as a means to propagate. You know, we all know what propaganda is. They wanted to propagate the gospel now, or their version of the gospel to who and what they considered notorious infidels, which was basically those same Negroes and Indians. All right. Also, the Negroes, a lot of the Negroes were escaping their plantations and going to dwell amongst Indians. And some of the Negroes who were escaping were getting captured by some of these Indian tribes. But it says, the Society for the Propagation of the Gospel in Foreign Parts entered upon its duties with zeal, being patronized by the king and all the dignitaries of the Church of England. So they had a lot of money, a lot of backing behind propagating the gospel in foreign parts. Remember what Paul said about if somebody come with another Jesus, another gospel, and another spirit, all right, they instituted inquiries into the religious condition of the colonies, responded to by the governors and the persons of the best note, with special reference to the episcopacy, and they perceived that their work consisted of 3 great branches: the care and instruction of our people settled in the colonies. That was the first thing. They wanted to make sure they people in all these colonies were straight and had privileges. All right. the conversion of Indian savages, and the conversion of Negroes. All right, these were the three branches of the institution. Before appointing missionaries, they sent out a traveling preacher, the Reverend George Keith, and itinerant missionary or an intern. They sent an intern out to the Indian savages and the Negroes, who associated with himself the Reverend John Talbot. Mr. Keith preached between North Carolina and Piscataqua River in New England. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Some of y'all on the East Coast can probably help me out with that. They tracked above 800 miles in length and completed his mission in 2 years and returned and reported his labors to the society. Wow. Don't that sound familiar? Sound like what Paul and the apostles had. They went out and preached and then came back and reported to the people in Jerusalem. So it's the same thing. It's the establishment of their gospel. The annual meetings of this society were regularly held from 1702 to 1819, and 118 sermons preached before it by bishops of the Church of England, a large number of them distinguished for piety, learning, and zeal. The society still exists. The efforts of the Society for the Religious Instruction of the Negroes are briefly as follows. All right. Piscataway. All right. I see you, Brother Yash. That's Piscataway. Okay. Sound like some Indian. I don't know. It's one of them Indian rivers. Piscataway. 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 Brother Yash, you put that in there like you ain't feel like Piscataway. But I don't know. Y'all know. Let me see. The efforts of the Society for the Religious Instruction of the Negroes are briefly as follows. So let's see what happened. In June 1702, the Reverend Samuel Thomas, the first missionary, was sent to the colony of South Carolina. The society designated he should attempt the conversion of the Yamasee Indians. All right. Let me see something. Yamasee Indians, but the governor, Sir Nathaniel Johnson, appointed him to the care of the people settled on the three branches of Copper River, making Goose Creek his residence. Hold on one second. Let me look up something real quick. Okay, hold on. Why? Hey. We hear a lot of times that first so-called Indian tribes were black. Right? Yamasee Indians. All right, so let me see something. Let's look at some Yamasee Indians. All right. So this was a tribe of Indians. They said that they were trying to convert. That picture doesn't really identify who that is, but you see got the dark skin, and then it said got the red skin. All right. Now, like I said, we know according to the history, that a lot of our people mingled in with some of those people. All right. All right, here's a picture right here. Yamasee Indians, Washoe Indians. That's more of a propaganda type picture. It's Cherokee. Yamasee Indians, the black natives of America. All right, and you see our people want to be everything but ourselves. It says Yamasee. All right. Original, that's the India. Introducing the Yamasee Indian. These are tribes you don't really hear about. Different India tribes you don't really hear about. All right. Anyway, nothing really spectacular on that, but let's get it back. So it says the society designed he should attempt the conversion of the Yamasee Indians, but the governor, Sir Nathaniel Johnson, appointed him to the care of the people, settled on the 3 branches of Copper River, making Goose Creek his residence. He reported his labors to the society and said that he had taken much pains also in instructing the Negroes and learned 20 of them to read. He died in 1706. So he said he took great pains in instructing the Negroes, and he died 1706, and he learned, taught 20 of them to read. I guess back in that time, if I was to say taught, they would tell me I had bad English. But it says Dr. Lee Zhao succeeded him in 1706 and found parents and masters endued with much goodwill and a ready disposition to have their children and servants taught the Christian religion. He instructed and baptized many Negroes and Indian slaves. His communicants in 1714 arose to 70 English and 8 Negroes. Dr. Lee Zhao died in 1717 and was succeeded permanently by Reverend Mr. Ludlum, who began his mission with great diligence. There were in his parish a large number of Negroes, natives of the place, who understood English well. He took good pains to instruct several of them in the principles of the Christian religion, and afterwards admitted them to baptism. He said if the masters of them would heartily concur to forward so good a work, all those who have been born in the country might without much difficulty be instructed and received into the church. Mr. Ludlum continued his labors among the Negroes and every year taught and baptized several of them. In 1 year, 11, besides some mulattoes. Right. The Indian War checked the progress of the society's mission for several years. The parishes of St. Paul's 1705, St. John's 1707, St. Andrew's and St. Bartholomew 1713, St. Helens 1712 received missionaries. Mr. Hassel was settled in the last named parish, and the inhabitants were 565 whites, 950 Negroes, 60 Indian slaves, and 20 free Negroes. Reverend Gilbert Jones was appointed missionary of Christ Church Parish in 1711. He used great pains to persuade the masters and mistresses to assist in having their slaves instructed in the Christian faith, but found this good work lay under difficulties as yet insuperable. He wrote thus concerning this matter: though laboring in vain be very discouraging, yet by the help of God I will not cease my labors. And if I shall gain by one proselyte, shall not think much of all my pains. He was succeeded in 1722 by Reverend Mr. Pownall, 2 years after he reported in his parish 470 freeborn and above 700 slaves, some of which understand the English tongue, but very few know anything of God or religion. So 1722, that's why I was asking what year exactly was it when the slaves started to escape from the plantations and combine with the Native Americans or the Indian tribes, because a lot of this seem like it's coinciding with that. It says 2 years after he reported of his parish 470 freeborn and above 700 slaves, some of which understand the English tongue, but very few know anything of God or religion. In this parish of St. George, taken out of St. Andrews, the church stands 28 miles from Charleston. 1719, Mr. Peter Tustian was sent missionary, but soon removed to Maryland. The Reverend Mr. Bernard succeeded him in 1723. A year after his arrival at Christmas, he had nearly 50 communicants, and what was remarkable, 17 Negroes. He baptized several grown persons, beside children and Negroes, belonging to Alexander Skeen, Esquire. The Reverend Mr. Taylor, missionary at St. Andrew's Parish in South Carolina, reported to the society the great interest taken in the religious instruction of their Negroes by Miss Hage and Miss Edwards, and their remarkable success, 14 of whom on examination he baptized. The clergy of South Carolina, in a joint letter, acquainted the society with the fact that Mr. Skeen, his lady, and Miss Hage, his sister, did use great care to have their Negroes instructed and baptized. And Reverend Mr. Barnard, missionary, had baptized 8 Negro children belonging to Mr. Skeen and Miss Hage, and he writes to the society that at once he had 19 Negro communicants. Mr. Newman was sent as a missionary to North Carolina in 1722. He reported sometime after that he had baptized 269 children, 1 woman, 3 men, and 2 Negroes, who could say the Creed, the Lord's Prayer, and 10 Commandments, and had good sureties for their further information. The Reverend Mr. Beckett, missionary in Pennsylvania in 1723, reported that he had baptized 2 Negro slaves. In 1709, Mr. Huddlestone was appointed schoolmaster in New York City. He taught 40 poor children out of the society's funds and publicly catechized in the steeple of Trinity Church every Sunday in the afternoon, not only his own scholars, but also the children's servants and slaves of the inhabitants, and above 100 persons usually attended. Hold on one second. I gotta do this. Let me see. Instruct someone in the principles of Christian religion by means of question and answer, typically by using catechism. Let me see. To give oral instruction, especially religion, now especially by the formal question and answer method. So when it says he taught 40 poor children out of, as a matter of fact, let me show this. All right, that word catechized. When it said a catechized, it says to instruct someone in the principles of Christian religion by means of question and answer, typically by using a catechism. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. Hold on. Catechize. I'm sorry. Catechize. My fault. So catechize. So this is a method in which to give oral instruction, especially religion, now specifically by the formal question and answer method in the Church of England, to teach catechism as preparation for confirmation. All right, so basically to catechize is to like vet a little bit, or to have you regurgitate, all right, information to see if you learned what they gave you, basically, and if you were able to recite back, the questions they ask you based on the stuff that they exposed to you, then they baptized you and you were a good Negro, all right, so to speak. And so that was what they did. In 1709, Mr. Huddlestone was appointed schoolmaster in New York City. He taught 40 poor children out of the society's funds and publicly catechized in the steeple of Trinity Church every Sunday in the afternoon. Not only his own scholars, but also the children's servants and slaves of the inhabitants, and above 100 persons usually attended him. All right, so this was their converting Negroes and Indians to the gospel. The society established also a catechizing school in the New York City in 1705, in which cities there were computed to be about 1,500 Negroes and Indian slaves. The society hoped their example would be generally followed in the colonies. Mr. Elias Newell, a French Protestant, was appointed catechist, who was very zealous in his duty, and many Negroes were instructed and baptized. In 1712, Negroes in New York conspired to destroy all the English, which greatly discouraged the work of their instruction. The conspiracy was defeated and many Negroes taken and executed. Mr. Newell's school was blamed as the main occasion of the barbarous plot. Two of Mr. Newell's schools were charged with the plot. One was cleared and the other was proved to have been in the conspiracy, but guiltless of his master's murder. Upon full trial, the guilty Negroes were found to be such as never came to Mr. Newell's school. And what is very observable, the persons whose Negroes were found mostly guilty were such as were the declared opposers of making them Christians. So you had some Negroes that rebelled. It says in a short time, the cry against the instruction of the Negroes subsided. The governor visited and recommended the school. Mr. Newell died in 1722, much regretted by all who knew his labors. He was succeeded by Reverend Mr. Wetmore, who afterwards was appointed missionary to Rye in New York. After his removal, the rector, church wardens, and vestry of Trinity Church in New York City requested another catechist, there being about 1,400 Negro and Indian slaves, and considerable number of them had been instructed in the principles of Christianity by the late Mr. Newell and had received baptism and were communicants in their church. The society complied with this request and sent over Reverend Mr. Colgan in 1726, who conducted the school with success. Mr. Honeyman, missionary in 1774 in Providence, Rhode Island, had baptized in 2 years 80 persons, of which 19 were grown, 3 Negroes, 2 Indians, 2 mulattoes. In Narragansett, the congregation was reported to be 160, 1720, with 12 Indian and black servants. At Marblehead, the missionary reported 1725 having baptized 2 Negroes, a man about 25 years old and a girl of 12, and that the whole family in Salem had conformed to the church. The society looked upon the instruction and conversion of the Negroes as a principal branch of their care, esteeming it a great reproach to the Christian name that so many thousands of persons should continue in the same state of pagan darkness under a Christian government and living in Christian families, as they lay before under their own heathen countries. Let me read that again. It says, society looked upon the instruction and conversion of the Negroes as a principal branch of their care, esteeming it a great reproach to the Christian name that so many thousands of persons should continue in the same state of pagan darkness under a Christian government and living in Christian families, as they lay before under in their own heathen countries. The society immediately from their first institution strove to promote their conversion, and in as much as their income would not enable them to send numbers of catechists sufficient to instruct the Negroes, yet they resolved to do their utmost and at least to give this work the mark of their highest approbation. So reading that, also taking into consideration that when a lot of Negroes came over here, they were Islam, they were Muslim. A lot of our people who came over here, this is why a lot of our people think Islam was our original religion. Well, most of our people had converted to Islam while they were in Spain and Portugal. And then from that, they were forced to convert to Christianity. You know, the ones who didn't, some of them died, you know, and the ones they were able to convert, they sent them down to the coast of Africa. All right. The children mostly, you know, they took the children and baptized them and converted them to Christianity, took them down into the coast of Africa. It says, they wrote, therefore, to all their missionaries that they should use their best endeavors at proper times to instruct the Negroes, and should especially take occasion to recommend it zealously to the masters to order their slaves at convenient times to come to them that they might be instructed. These directions had a good effect, and some hundreds of Negroes had been instructed, received baptism, and been admitted to the communion and lived very orderly lives. The history of the society goes on to say, it is a matter of commendation to the clergy that they have done thus much in so great and difficult a work. But alas, what is the instruction of a few hundreds in several years, with respect to the many thousands uninstructed, unconverted, living, dying, utter pagans? And so they were calling the people, well, they were referring to those of our people who didn't convert as pagans. All right. It says it must be confessed what has been done as it must be confessed what had been done is as nothing with regard to what a true Christian would hope to see effected. After stating several difficulties in respect to the religious instruction of the Negroes, which do not exist at the present time, but in a very limited degree, it is said, but the greatest obstruction is the masters themselves do not consider enough the obligation which lies upon them to have their slaves instructed. And in another place, the society have always been sensible. The most effectual way to convert the Negroes was by engaging their masters to countenance and promote their conversion. The Bishop of St. Asaph, Dr. Fleetwood, preached a sermon before the society in the year 1719, setting forth the duty of instructing the Negroes in the Christian religion. The society thought this so useful a discourse that they printed and dispersed abroad in the plantations great numbers of that sermon in the same year, and in the year 1725 reprinted the same and dispersed again large numbers. So they actually printed sermons and circulated them around to different plantations. It says the Bishop of London, Dr. Gibson, to whom the care of the plantations abroad as to religious affairs was committed, became a second advocate for the conversion of the Negroes and wrote 2 letters on this subject. The first in 1727, addressed to masters and mistresses of families in the English plantations abroad, exhorting them to encourage and promote instruction of their Negroes in the Christian faith. All right, so this 1726. This is what, 100 years or so after they were first brought here, and they're trying to figure out a way to civilize the Negroes, all right, or to bring them into an orderly way of life according to how they had it, which was under Christianity. And notice it's always a hesitancy of the masters to teach or instruct the Negroes properly in Christianity, because we read through the contents, that in order to instruct. Well, when you instruct the Negroes properly in Christianity, then you're going to eventually have to put them on the same level with you within society, and that would mess up their advantage. All right. It says the first in 1727 addressed the masters and mistresses of families in the English plantations abroad, exhorting them to encourage and promote instruction of their Negroes in the Christian faith. The second in the same year addressed to the missionaries there, directing them to distribute the said letter, exhorting them to give their assistance toward the instruction of the Negroes within their several parishes. The societies were persuaded this was the true method to remove the great obstruction to their conversion, and hoping so particular in application to the masters and mistresses from the See of London would have the strongest influence. They printed 10,000 copies of the letter to masters and mistresses, which were sent to all the colonies on the continent and to all the British Islands and the West Indies, to be distributed among the masters of families and all other inhabitants. The society received accounts that these letters influenced many masters of families to have their servants instructed. The Bishop of London soon after wrote an address to serious Christians among ourselves to assist the society in propagating the gospel and carrying on this work. The letters of Dr. Gibson referred to their intrinsic excellence, and as an indication of the state of feeling on the subject at the time they were written, render it proper that they should be interested in this sketch. I have not been able to obtain a copy of Dr. Fleetwood's sermon, the Bishop of London's letter to the masters and mistresses and families in the English plantations abroad, exhorting them to encourage and promote the instruction of their Negroes in the Christian faith. London, 1727. So a lot of these European countries had interest in the colonies that were established over here in America in the early 1600s up until the Declaration of Independence. The care of the plantations abroad being committed to the bishops of London. As to religious affairs, I have thought it my duty to make particular inquiries into the state of religion in those parts, and to learn, among other things, what number of slaves are employed within the several governments, and what means are used for their instruction in the Christian faith. I find the numbers are prodigiously great, and am not a little troubled to observe how small a progress has been made in a Christian country towards the delivering those poor creatures from the pagan darkness and superstition in which they were bred, and making them partakers of the light of the gospel and of the blessings and the benefits belonging to it. All right, so like I said, a lot of our people, when brought over here, were into Islam and other different beliefs. And so they thought it was civilizing them by converting them over to Christianity. All right. It says, and which is yet more to be laminated. I find there has not only been very little progress made in the work, but that all attempts toward it have been by too many industriously discouraged and hindered, partly by magnifying the difficulties of the work beyond what they really are, and partly by mistaken suggestions of the change which baptism would make in the condition of the Negroes to the loss and disadvantage of their masters. Like I told you, you had all of these European church leaders who were trying to get the slave masters to use the gospel to or use Christianity as a means of converting the Negroes over, but the masters weren't really pushing the work or trying to have the Negroes really converted over to Christianity like that, because like I said, by baptizing them and giving them the true instruction, they felt that would change the condition of the Negro and put them at a disadvantage over the Negro. It says, as to the difficulties, it may be pleaded that the Negroes are grown persons when they come over, and that having been accustomed to pagan rites and idolatries of their own country, they are prejudiced against all other religions, and more particularly against the Christian, as forbidding all that licentiousness which is usually practiced among the heathens. But if this were a good argument against attempting the conversion of Negroes, it would follow that the gospel is never further to be propagated than it is at present, and that no endeavors are to be used for a conversion of heathens at any time or in any country whatsoever, because all heathens have been accustomed to pagan rites and idolatries, and to such vicious and licentious living as the Christian religion forbids. But yet, God be thanked, heathens have been converted and Christianity propagated in all ages, in almost all countries, through the zeal and diligence of pious and good men, and this without the help of miracles. And if the present age be as zealous and diligent in pursuing the proper means of conversion, we have no reason to doubt that the divine assistance is and will be the same in all ages. So basically, they wanted the slave masters to have the same zeal and diligence of trying to convert the slaves over that they did. They saying if they do this, then it'll be the same way as in the past ages. It says, but a further difficulty is that they are utter strangers to our language and we to theirs. All right, so let me see something. They considered them pagans. All right. And it says that another difficulty was that utter strangers. It says, but a further difficulty is that they are utter strangers to our language and we to theirs. Remember what he said, that a nation gonna come from afar of a strange language, right? And it says, and the gift of tongues being now ceased, there is no means left of instructing them in the doctrines of Christian religion. So that's basically saying that because of that difficulty or that language barrier, it says, and the gift of tongues being now ceased. All right. So they couldn't understand the languages. It says there is no means left of instructing them in the doctrines of the Christian religion. And this, I own, is a real difficulty as long as it continues and as far as it reaches. But if I am rightly informed, many of the Negroes who are grown persons, when they come over, do of themselves attain so much of our language as enables them to understand and to be understood in things which concern the ordinary business of life. And they who can go so far of their own accord might doubtless be carried much further if proper methods and endeavors were used to bring them to a complete knowledge of our language, with a pious view to the instructing them in the doctrines of our religion. So in other words, he's saying there's some Negroes that's able to come over here and pick up the language, at least for the purpose of just day-to-day living. And if they were instructed, then they would excel, basically. It says, and at least some of them who are more capable and more serious than the rest might be easily instructed both in our language and religion, and then be made use of to convey instruction to the rest of their own language. So they really trying to find a way to try to instruct these Negroes, all right, but the masters really don't want that to happen. They trying to convert us over to their Christian belief, but the slave masters don't want it to happen. And they basically saying we can get the best among them, instruct them, and then they can instruct their own people. Said this, one would hope, may be done with great ease, wherever there is a hearty and sincere zeal for the work. But whatever difficulties there may be in instructing those who are grown up before they are brought over, there are not the like difficulties in the case of their children who are born and bred in our own plantations, who have never been accustomed to pagan rites and superstitions, and who may easily be trained up like all other children to any language whatsoever, and particularly to our own, if the making them good Christians be sincerely the desire and intentions of those who have the property in them and the government over them. So in other words, it's harder to deal with a grown person who's already set in their ways and languages and traditions. It's easier to deal with a younger baby, that's born in our plantations, who haven't been accustomed to what they would call pagan rites. All right. We know that some of our people were in Islam, but then some of our people were keeping Sabbaths and feasts and all those things, and they brought some of those people over. So you had a mixture of all of that with our people during this time, and they considered all of that pagan. So it says this will all work if the making of them good Christians be sincerely the desire and intention of those who have the property in them and government over them. So in other words, hold on one second. I'm trying to find a stopping point. So in other words, if slave masters really sincere about this, then it can work, all right, basically. But supposing the difficulties to be much greater than I imagine, they are not such as render the work impossible, so as to leave no hope of any degree of success, and nothing less than an impossibility of doing any good at all can warrant our giving over and laying aside all means and endeavors where the propagation of the gospel and the saving of souls are immediately concerned. So basically the slave owners and the governments were rendering the work that they were commissioning them to do, they were rendering it impossible. Right, so it's impossible to convert these Negroes over to civilization and to the gospel of our Jesus Christ, because in doing so, that will put them on an equal playing field with us, and plus we can't understand them and they can't understand us. All right. So we kind of get a feel for what's going on. We see that our people were brought over to the country. it didn't really detail anything about chattel slavery or anything, but I guess the book is really focusing on our people from the time they were brought over up until the point where they started to try to assimilate them. You know, we read a lot of baptisms and things like that, and a lot of what our people were being converted over, it was through catechism or through oral speaking or teaching. So it wasn't really any scripture involved. It was just more so you listen to what the sermon says and you abide by what the sermon say. You accept it, and that's it. You know, you get baptized, you accept the gospel, and you become a good slave. You know, you become a non-threat, basically. But it mentioned a lot of our people rebelling and going against it. They called them pagans. Now, rightfully so. Like I said, a lot of our people were into witchcraft and Islam and, you know, different things. But then you had some of our people who kept the customs, was keeping feasts and keeping different things. And according to the slave trade database, they maintained their Hebrew names, you know, upon being brought over here. And so let me see where I am. I'm gonna go ahead and stop here and document this. Like I said, I'm just reading through this, getting some history. Let me see something. Okay. All right, I'm on page 31. All right, so I'm gonna stop it here. I've seen Brother Yash in the chat. I'm gonna put the link in here. Brother Yash, you want to chop it up for a few? We can. I'm gonna take a break, give you some time to chime in. When I get back, we're gonna close out. All right. Shalom, brothers and sisters. I'll be right back. I want to thank you, brothers and sisters, once again for chiming in and joining in with this reading. I'm going to be picking it back up later this week, maybe Thursday, where we left off, dealing with the religious instructions of the Negro, the history of our people being brought to this nation and being assimilated into the religion we know as Christianity. And like I said, for brothers and sisters who are interested in this reading and want to read along and want a copy, email me at ebrystore@gmail.com. Let me know who you are. Let me know that you're requesting a copy of the religious instruction for the Negro, and then I'll get it to you from there. All right. So don't forget about Kingdom Conversations, Wednesday night, 8 p.m., 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 and 10 p.m. Eastern. All right. Hosted by our brother Cleo. Got Wake Up Jacob Friday at 12 noon Central, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern. All right. Friday night prayer and fellowship, 8:30 p.m. Central, 6:30 p.m. Pacific, and 9:30 to 10:30 p.m. Eastern. All right. Look forward to seeing you, brothers and sisters, there. Brother Yashe, he said the internet is tripping. That's okay. I'm gonna go ahead and shut down, brothers and sisters. Like I said, I may come back maybe Thursday or so, but Brother Kadar and we're gonna get together later this week and do a live dealing with a video critique. All right, but we're gonna get together and try to formulate that. It's gonna be dealing with a video that's expressing how kingdom was given to the Gentiles as a means of our people rejecting Mashiach. Real interesting video, but we wanted to touch on some strong points for the family. Some people may be aware of it, some people may not be. But once again, it's in alignment with the upcoming work, the supersessionism. Let me get that back up. All right. Supersessionism Part 1, live in 10 days. All right. Friday, February the 25th at 4 p.m. Once again, you brothers and sisters, be on the lookout for that. Like and share. And also, if you haven't hit the like button and the share button, feel free to do so. It'd be greatly appreciated. Yeah, so that'll be it, brothers and sisters, for tonight. I want to thank y'all for joining in. May the Most High be with you. I want to say peace and blessings once again to all of my brothers, salt of the earth. Shout out to everybody out there doing work for the Most High via platforms, or face to face, however you're doing it. Shout out to all of my people, those who are waiting patiently for the salvation of the Most High. All right, be safe, brothers and sisters. Be patient, be true, be blessed. This has been a Salt of the Earth Productions. Hallelujah.
Everywhere I go, the children rising. Everywhere I go, the children rising. I saw them just rise up. The wicked running. I saw them just rise up.